7 people are dead. 17,000 homes are still in the dark. And as of this morning, neither disaster is finished. The United States is spending this weekend fighting 2 completely separate water sea catastrophes at the same time, thousands of miles apart from each other. And most people watching the news are only hearing about one of them. Here's the full picture of both. Exactly what's happening. On exactly why it's so dangerous and exactly why the people in charge of keeping Americans safe are still not done. Because both of these events are still actively unfolding right now. On August 11th, 2026, a system of severe storms begins spreading across the state of Indiana. What follows over the next 4 days is not just a flood, it's a record-shattering, infrastructure-breaking, historically significant deluge that redraws the map of what's physically possible in a Midwestern summer. The National Weather Service reports that some areas of Indiana received more than 11 inches of rain in a window of just a couple of days. The single highest location total came out of New Castle, Indiana, where the rain gauge recorded roughly 11.4 inches. Greensburg took more than 7 inches. Those numbers alone are serious, but raw rainfall totals don't tell you the full story. The full story is about what happens when that rain falls on ground that's already completely saturated. Indiana had absorbed repeated rounds of heavy storms in the days leading up to August 11th. The soil wasn't just damp, it was full. There was nowhere left for water to go. And this is the single most important physical idea in understanding what happened next. And when ground is saturated, the percentage of every additional inch of rainfall that occasionally soaks into the soil collapses close to zero. And the percentage that runs off directly into the nearest river or stream climbs toward 100%. So when those 11 inches fell on Indiana between August 11th and 13th, they didn't behave like 11 inches of rain. They behaved like 11 inches of water poured directly into the river. Every single drop straight into the channel with nowhere else to go. The White River took all of it. Flooding concentrated along the main stem of the White River, running from Hamilton County down into the northern suburbs of Indianapolis. Multiple river systems across the state went under flood warning simultaneously. Drone footage. GE captured by news crews showed floodwaters swallowing entire streets in the Ravenswood neighborhood of Indianapolis, submerging cars up to their roofs, rising to the front doors of homes, while residents navigated their own neighborhoods in kayaks and rowboats. That's not a flood. That's an inland sea appearing overnight inside a major American city. And then the White River did something nobody alive had ever seen it do before. At the Anderson Gauge Station, the river crested on Friday at a level that beat the previous all-time record, a record that had stood since 1913, 113 years. 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the Interstate High. Way system being built, the moon landing, every flood that came through Indiana in all that time. And none of them touched that number until Friday, August 14th, 2026. Upstream at Noblesville, about 15 miles north of Indianapolis, the river also broke its own 1913 record. Here's the part that makes this genuinely extraordinary and not just a headline number. The 1913 flood, the one that held that record for over a century, was not a summer event. The Great Flood of 1913 was a spring flood. It ran on a combination of snowmelt and heavy rain. In late March of that year, a massive storm system brought 6 to 11 inches of rain across Indiana, Ohio, and parts of Pennsylvania, and Kentucky, on top of a snowpack that was already melting into ground that was still partially frozen in places. That's an enormous hydrological load, snow melting into frozen ground that can't absorb it, plus heavy rain on top. That event killed an estimated 100 to 200 people in Indiana alone, left more than 250,000 people across the Midwest homeless, and became the second deadliest flood in United States history. It set the benchmark. It became the measurement against which every subsequent Indiana flood was judged for over a century. The August 2026 flood beat it with rainfall alone. No snowpack, no frozen ground, no spring melt already sitting in the channel before the rain started. August in Indiana is supposed to be the season when a river has the most capacity to absorb a shock. Summer, warm ground, no snowmelt. The 1913 record was set with every single hydrological advantage stacked in its favor. Every factor that could make a flood worse was present in 1913, and a summer thunderstorm sequence just walked past it. That detail should stop you cold, because it means the infrastructure, the flood maps, the insurance rate calculations, the height of levees, the design of drainage systems, the location of roads that go underwater in a flood, all of it was built around a number from 1913. And on that Friday, that number stopped being the ceiling. The meteorology behind this is important to understand because it isn't exotic. It isn't a once-in-a-lifetime atmospheric setup. It's a stall. A frontal boundary sets up across the Midwest and then stops advancing. Hot, humid air presses northward from the Gulf of Mexico, and cooler air ho. LD is to the north of the boundary, essentially balancing each other out, and the front park's in place. At the same time, a high-pressure system sitting over the Gulf acts like a moisture conveyor belt, pumping warm, water-loaded air north. Ward, straight into that stationary boundary. Every disturbance rolling along the jet stream then fires a fresh round of thunderstorm cells along the front. And because those cells track perpendicular to the boundary, they cross the same counties again and again and again. Meteorologists call this training. The image is exactly what it sounds like. Storm cells running down the same track like cars on a train, each one dumping its full load of rain on exactly the same patch of ground. Each previous cell just soaked. A single thunderstorm that crosses a county in 40 minutes leaves behind a manageable amount of water. The same storm regenerating over the same county for 2 straight days leaves behind a catastrophe. And the intensity of any individual storm C, well, it never has to be unusual for this to happen. Only the geometry has to be wrong. And the geometry is set entirely by whether the boundary is moving. The 1913 Great Flood had the same failure mode, a storm system that stalled. 113 years apart, Indiana was hit by the exact same atmospheric mechanism. Now let's talk about the people. At least 7 people have died in flooding and storms across Indiana as of the latest confirmed count. That number was 5 on Friday, moved to 6 by Saturday, and was revised to 7 by Sunday. It should still be treated as a live figure. Among the victims was an 18-year-old Incami, a freshman at Purdue University who entered a swollen local river with 3 friends on Wednesday as the flooding was beginning. His body was recovered by the Delaware County Sheriff's Office. 2 days later, a 4-year-old boy in Jennings County was killed when a tree crashed through the roof of his home during strong wind. Daz, a 58-year-old woman in Lake County, an 86-year-old woman in Porter County, a 32-year-old man in LaPorte County, and a 31-year-old man in Henry County were among the others. 7 people, ordinary people in ordinary Indiana towns, killed by water and wind that nobody predicted would be this severe. The Indianapolis Fire Department alone pulled 95 people and 45 pets out of floodwaters by late Saturday afternoon. Just one city's fire department in a single afternoon. Responders ran rescues and welfare checks in Fayette County. A senior mobile HOM community in Tipton County was fully evacuated. National Guard soldiers worked alongside local first responders on high water recovery operations in Indianapolis. Hamilton County officials reported historic flooding across the county. The president of the Hamilton County Board of Commissioners said on Sunday morning that it was a good morning because it's not raining and the water is receding. That was the bar. Not raining and water going down. That's what counted as a good morning. After a week like this, the governor of Indiana declared a statewide disaster emergency and requested federal aid. An emergency declaration for the state was approved at the federal level, and FEMA confirmed that federal disaster assistance is available. But here's a distinction that matters enormously. An emergency declaration and a major disaster declaration are not the same thing. An emergency declaration is the faster, smaller instrument. It frees up to $5 million in federal resources, and it's designed for immediate response. Moving PAO. PL, moving equipment, keeping the operation running while the water is still up. $5 million is a response budget. It is not a recovery budget, and it is certainly not a rebuilding budget for a river corridor that just set a 113-year crest record through the second largest metropolitan area in Indiana. The larger instrument is a major disaster declaration. That's what unlocks individual assistance for households whose homes were destroyed, and public assistance for repairing infrastructure. Getting there requires joint preliminary damage, assessments in all the affected counties, and those assessments were still being completed as of the following Monday. Until those numbers come back, $5 million is what's on the table, and against a flood that just rewrote the historical record, that is not enough. The flooding threat didn't stay in Indiana. By Sunday night and into Monday, heavy rains spread the problem eastward. Flooding hit communities in Ohio, with firefighters in Perry County alone making more than 50 water rescues on Saturday night and into Sunday morning. A woman was found stranded on top of her car in floodwaters in Thorne Township. The flooding threat extended into West Virginia and Kentucky. What started as an Indiana story became a regional story, a Midwest water crisis spreading east with the weather system. Now, thousands of miles west, a different disaster, completely different cause, exactly the same result. A hurricane strengthened from a tropical storm into a Category 1 storm on Saturday, August 15, 2026, as it approached Hawaii's Big Island with maximum sustained winds of around 75 miles per hour. The National Hurricane Center used the phrase life-threatening conditions before the storm's closest approach. The Stemi. RM never made an official landfall. Its eye passed the southern tip of the Big Island without crossing the coastline. Forecasters had noted before the event that a direct strike would have been Hawaii's first hurricane landfall in more than 30 years. It didn't happen. There's no landfall point on the record. The storm officially grazed, not struck, and it still swept occupied homes completely off their foundations. Rain in the heaviest bands fell at rates of 3 to 5 inches per hour. not 3 to 5 inches total for a day, 3 to 5 inches per hour. One day totals surpassed 2 feet of rain in some locations. The Big Island's mountains received more than 3.5 feet of rainfall, over 42 inches. Maui's mountainous areas saw up to 2 feet, and forecasters revised the maximum storm total forecast upward as the storm slowed down over the islands. When a storm slows, the rain piles up in the same location. The same physics that stalled the front over Indiana. The same principle of sustained rate over a fixed location, playing out in Hawaii in the form of a tropical cyclone that reduced its forward speed at exactly the wrong moment. Hawaii County's mayor said publicly that several occupied homes may have been swept off their foundations in the Nalihu and Wood Valley areas, describing a river of water tearing through the area and washing away a great deal. Hawaii County Civil Defense launched a joint search and rescue operation using county resources, the Hawaii National Guard, and the Kupeokpai Coast Guard to reach people who had called 911 for help, but couldn't be reached because flooding and boulders blocked the roads. Search and rescue operations ran in the dark, in rushing water, with boulders on the roads, trying to reach people who called for help and then went silent because the cell towers went down. One person was killed in a storm-related vehicle crash on the Big Island. Over 100 homes were damaged or destroyed on Hawaii Island alone. 6 bridges were destroyed or nearly destroyed in the Kau area. Hawaii's governor described the scene as utter devastation in parts of the south. A section of highway collapsed overnight into Sunday, cutting off critical access to an area where one of the region's only hospitals is located. The collapse created a new waterfall where a road used to be. Airlines canceled dozens of flights, with roughly 190 total flights across the state canceled or delayed on Saturday alone. All state offices, county offices, schools, courts, and judiciary offices were closed Monday. And the power situation is where the full weight of island geography becomes impossible to ignore. By Saturday night, over 88,000 electric utility customers were without power. By Sunday morning, that figure had climbed to over 178,000. By Monday morning, approximately 117,000 CUS Tomers remained in the dark across 3 islands, with 41,000 on Hawaii Island alone, mostly concentrated in the Puna, North and South Kona, North and South Kohala, Hamakua, and South Hilo districts. The utility warned that some outages may last months, not days. Here's why the word months is not an exaggeration. Hawaii's islands are not grid interconnected. They are not connected to each other, and they are not connected to any mainland network. When a storm hits the continental United States and takes out transmission lines, utilities can call for mutual aid, and convoys of repair trucks arrive overnight from neighboring states. That system is how major continental outages get fixed in days. It does not exist for Hawaii. There's no road from the mainland to Hawaii. Every repair crew, every replacement pole, every transformer, every spool of transmission line is either already on that island, or it has to arrive by ship or by plane. The electric utility requested personnel from partner utilities on the mainland, and approximately 100 crew members were anticipated to arrive by Tuesday to begin work Wednesday, flown in. 2 of Hawaii Island's largest independent power producers, a geothermal plant and an energy partnership, were disconnected from the grid because of storm damage. Wind energy providers were also offline. A long span of transmission line along the Hamakua coast required asses, cement, after falling trees, took down multiple poles and structures across the corridor. That is not a scattered outage, that is a backbone failure. And on an island, a backbone failure does not get fixed by a utility to states over lending you their trucks. The second order effects of an extended island power outage compound rapidly. An outage takes down water systems that depend on electric pumping. The Department of Water Supply issued an essential needs-only notice for all customers, limiting water use to drinking, cooking, and personal hygiene. An extended outage takes down refrigeration for food. It takes down refrigeration for medication, including insulin and other drugs that can't tolerate heat. It takes down the cell towers people use to call 911. Emergency managers use to find them and coordinate rescues. Generators cover some of this for a while, then they run out of fuel, and fuel also arrives by ship. None of this is unique to Hawaii in kind. Every island faces this challenge. It's only unique in degree because in Hawaii there is simply no road out. The governor estimated the storm has caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damage statewide. That estimate was made while damage assessments by helicopter and drone were still being completed on Hawaii Island and Oahu. The actual number will be higher. It always is. So, both events, same week. What connects them and what does it mean? These 2 disasters have nothing to do with each other meteorologically. There's no shared storm system, no common atmospheric front, no single weather pattern linking the Midwest to the Central Pacific. One is a stalled frontal boundary. The other is a tropical cyclone. They are completely separate, but they are doing their damage in exactly the same way. Nithodaias. 1 is primarily a wind story. Both are water volume stories, and both of them broke through benchmarks and records that local infrastructure had been built around. In Indiana's case, for more than a century. There's also a deeply important story here about how warning systems work, where they fail, and why accurate forecasts do not automatically produce safe outcomes. The National Weather Service in Indianapolis had upgraded the White River outlook from moderate to major flood severity days before the crest arrived, with flood warnings written to extend out for days. Asters published in advance, in clear language, that the worst had not yet arrived. The National Hurricane Center used the words life-threatening before the storm's closest approach to Hawaii. The Hawaii Electric Utility warned customers before the storm about possible extended outages. In both cases, the forecast was correct, the science worked, the warning was issued, and people still died. Homes were still destroyed, and 100,000 people were still sitting in the dark. The gap between an accurate forecast and a safe outcome is not a forecasting problem. It's an infrastructure problem. It's a flood map problem. It's a problem of where people are allowed to build and on what terms. It's a problem of mobile home communities located in floodplains with no elevation margin and residents with no vehicle to evacuate. It's a problem of Category 1 hurricane ratings that measure sustained wind and tell you almost nothing useful about a rain rate of 5 inches per hour landing on steep volcanic slopes, AB, of a coastal town. It's a problem of a public that hears Category 1 and decides it's survivable because Category 1 is the lowest rung on the scale. And survivable is a reasonable interpretation of the lowest rung, right up until 5 inches of rain per hour start running down a mountain into your neighborhood. The Saffir-Simpson scale measures one thing: sustained wind. Category 1 is roughly 74 to 95 miles per hour. That's what the number tells you. It tells you almost nothing useful about the hazard that actually kills people and destroys houses in Hawaii, which is extraordinary rainfall on steep volcanic terrain that forces moist air upward and wrings it out, producing rainfall rates far above what the same storm would generate over flat ground or open water. A Category 1 storm that never made landfall did this. The category isn't wrong. It's measuring the wrong thing. And in Diana, a severe thunderstorm warning is one of the most routine alerts in the American Midwest. People who have lived there their whole lives have heard that alert hundreds of times. A stalled line of routine thunderstorms just took down the M. Ost famous flood record in the state's history. In both cases, the public-facing warning communicated something close to the inverse of the actual threat level. There's one more thing worth stating clearly. A 100-year flood does not mean a flood that happens once per century. That's a common and dangerous misunderstanding. A 100-year flood means a flood with a 1% chance of being equaled or exceeded in any given year. Two of them C-O-N-A, I think it being statistically wrong. But that 1% figure is calculated from the historical gauge record, and that calculation assumes the past is a valid sample of the future. Every floodplain map, every levee height, every culvert diameter, EVA, hairy flood insurance rate map in Indiana, and a large portion of local building codes sit downstream of that assumption. When a record that stood for 113 years falls to a mechanism that didn't even set the original record, rainfall alone beating rainfall plus snowmelt, the assumption itself is what's being tested. So where do things stand right now? In Indiana, floodwaters along the White River are receding, but the damage assessment is just beginning. Officials in Hamilton County said the water is finally starting to go back, but recovery along the W. Height River corridor is still active. The death toll stands at 7 confirmed, and it may still move as water continues to recede and recovery operations continue. The joint preliminary damage assessments that determine whether Indiana gets upgraded from an emergency D. Declaration to a major disaster declaration are underway. Those assessments are the next concrete milestone to watch until they come back with a dollar figure. $5 million is the federal number currently on the table against a flood that just broke a 113-year record through the second largest metropolitan corridor in the state. The flooding threat has spread east. Ohio communities were hit Sunday night. The system is not done moving. In Hawaii, roughly 117,000 customers remain without power as of Monday morning. Crews repaired several major transmission lines over the weekend, one of the first steps to rebuilding the backbone of the grid. About 100 mainland crew members are expected to arrive Tuesday to begin work Wednesday. Damage assessments by helicopter and drone continue on Hawaii Island and Oahu. Over 100 homes are damaged or destroyed. 6 bridges are destroyed or nearly destroyed in the Kau area. The highway calling. APS continues to cut off access to a hospital. All schools and government offices are closed Monday. The governor's damage estimate stands at hundreds of millions of dollars, and that number will rise. Hawaii's last hurricane landfall was Hurricane Iniki on September 11, 1992, a Category 4 storm that struck Kauai, killed 7 people, and caused approximately $3.1 billion in damage at the time. That was nearly 34 years ago. Most residents of the Big Island have never lived through a hurricane. Preparedness decays across a gap that long, and this storm tested it without even coming ashore. Both disasters are still unfolding. Both recovery timelines are measured in weeks, not days. Both events broke through numbers that were supposed to hold: the assumptions, the flood maps, the historical records, the category scales, and what people read into them. And in both places, the people who live there are now waking up to a world where the old numbers don't apply anymore, where the benchmark is gone, where what they built their lives around, the assumption of where the water would stop, turns out to be wrong. The United States is fighting two simultaneous federal-scale disasters this weekend. 7 dead in Indiana, 1 dead in Hawaii, 100,000 still without power, dozens of homes gone, an 18-year-old who should have been starting college in weeks, a 4-year-old who never gets to grow up, a county commissioner for whom a good morning simply means it isn't raining. Neither of these stories is over. The water is going down in Indiana, and the power is slowly coming back on in Hawaii. But the sea coning is just beginning. The damage assessments, the insurance fights, the questions about flood maps and building codes and what gets rebuilt where and on what terms, those conversations will take years. The infrastructure decisions that follow from this week's event, will take decades. And the numbers that just got broken will either be written into the new maps, the new floodplains, the new design standards, or they'll be ignored until someday, decades from now. And someone stands in front of a camera and says another record just fell, one that dated all the way back to 2026, the year 2 disasters hit America at once.